There is a particular kind of loneliness that feels more unsettling than being alone. It does not arrive in silence or emptiness, but in closeness. It appears while lying next to someone in bed, sharing meals, sharing plans, sharing a life. And yet, beneath this intimacy, something remains untouched. This is the loneliness that exists even in love, a quiet contradiction that many experience but few know how to name. From the outside, such relationships often look successful. There is affection, routine, mutual care, perhaps even devotion. But internally, a subtle ache persists. Not dramatic enough to justify leaving, not visible enough to explain to others. It manifests as a sense of being emotionally unseen, of speaking without being fully heard, of being known in function, but not in essence. One may feel accompanied, yet profoundly alone. Phenomenologically, this loneliness is not about the absence of another person, but the absence of emotional resonance. It is the feeling that one's inner world exists behind glass, visible, perhaps, but unreachable. Conversations stay safe, feelings are filtered, and vulnerability feels oddly inappropriate. Over time, the self begins to shrink to fit what can be shared without discomfort. This creates a deep inner tension. Love is present, yet so is isolation. Gratitude coexists with emptiness. The mind struggles to reconcile these opposing truths. If I am loved, why do I feel lonely? This question often goes unanswered, replaced instead by self-doubt. The individual may conclude that something is wrong with them, that they are too sensitive, too demanding, or incapable of appreciating what they have. Cognitive dissonance forms between emotional reality and relational expectation. Psychologically, this loneliness carries shame. Society permits loneliness when one is single, abandoned, or rejected, but not when one is chosen and choosing. To admit loneliness in love feels like betrayal, ingratitude, or failure. As a result, the feeling is suppressed, intellectualized, or normalized. But suppression does not dissolve it. It only pushes it deeper, where it quietly shapes identity and desire. Existentially, this phenomenon reveals a difficult truth. Love does not automatically create connection. Emotional intimacy requires more than proximity or commitment. It requires mutual access to inner life. Without this access, love can coexist with solitude. Two people can share a life while remaining existentially separate. This documentary begins here, not to undermine love, but to look at it honestly, to explore why loneliness can survive even in closeness, and what this reveals about attachment, emotional development, and the defenses we carry into relationships. Before we seek solutions, we must first allow the experience itself to be seen, without judgment, without blame, and without the comforting illusion that love alone is always enough. The loneliness that exists within love rarely announces itself directly. Instead, it reveals itself through small, almost invisible signs, subtle shifts in behavior, mood, and inner dialogue that are easy to dismiss as stress, personality, or circumstance. These psychological signals often go unnoticed precisely because they feel ordinary, woven into daily life. One common sign is emotional self-censorship. The individual begins to edit their inner world before expressing it. Certain thoughts feel too heavy, certain emotions unnecessary, certain needs unreasonable. Over time, they share less, not because they have less to say, but because they have learned what will not be received. This creates a relational asymmetry, presence without depth, communication without exposure. Another signal is chronic low-grade dissatisfaction. Nothing is overtly wrong, yet nothing feels fully right. The relationship functions, but it does not nourish. People in this state often describe feeling restless, irritable, or inexplicably tired when with their partner. Neuroscientifically, this may reflect prolonged emotional inhibition, which keeps the nervous system in a state of subtle tension. The body senses what the mind rationalizes away. There is also a tendency toward emotional loneliness, disguised as independence. The person may pride themselves on being self-sufficient, not needing much, or being easy to be with. While autonomy is healthy, this version often masks a learned belief that emotional needs are burdensome. Attachment theory would describe this as avoidant adaptation, where closeness is desired, but vulnerability feels unsafe or unrewarded. Behaviorally, this loneliness can appear as compulsive distraction. Even in shared time, attention drifts elsewhere. Phones, work, tasks, background noise. Silence becomes uncomfortable, not because of conflict, but because it invites awareness of what is missing. Intimacy is replaced with parallel living, two lives running side by side, rarely intersecting emotionally. Another sign is a muted emotional palette. Joy is present, but shallow. Sadness appears, but is quickly minimized. Anger is softened into humor. This emotional flattening is not indifference, it is restraint. The psyche learns that full emotional expression has no landing place, so it reduces its range to what feels safe. Internally, a quiet narrative often develops. This is just how relationships are. This belief serves as a psychological anesthetic, protecting the individual from confronting loss without departure. Yet, it also forecloses the possibility of deeper connection. When expectations are lowered to avoid disappointment, intimacy becomes impossible by definition. Importantly, these signs do not indicate a lack of love. They indicate a lack of emotional reciprocity. Love can exist alongside misattunement, unspoken needs, and unresolved attachment wounds. The tragedy is not that something is broken, but that something vital remains unexpressed. Recognizing these patterns is unsettling because they challenge comforting assumptions. They force us to consider that loneliness is not always cured by togetherness, and that intimacy is not guaranteed by commitment. These signs are not accusations against partners, but signals from the self, quiet indicators that something within us is waiting to be met. To understand why loneliness can persist even within love, we must look beneath behavior and into mechanism, into the nervous system, the evolutionary past, and the unconscious strategies that quietly govern emotional life. At the neurological level, intimacy is regulated by systems designed for survival. The limbic system, particularly the amygdala, constantly scans for emotional safety. When closeness has historically been paired with rejection, unpredictability, or emotional neglect, the brain learns an association. Connection equals risk. Even in a loving relationship, the nervous system may remain guarded, subtly inhibiting openness. Oxytocin, the hormone often associated with bonding, only deepens connection when the body perceives safety. Without safety, closeness can paradoxically heighten anxiety rather than soothe it. Attachment theory provides a crucial lens here. Early relational experiences shape internal working models, unconscious expectations about how love operates. Anxious attachment may lead one to feel alone even when loved, because reassurance never fully registers internally. Avoidant attachment, on the other hand, creates distance as a protective reflex. Intimacy triggers discomfort rather than comfort. In both cases, loneliness is not caused by the partner's absence, but by the nervous system's inability to rest in connection. From an evolutionary perspective, human beings evolved in small, emotionally interdependent groups. Emotional expression was adaptive. It signaled needs, coordinated care, and reinforced bonds. Modern relationships, however, often demand emotional containment. We are expected to be regulated, functional, and independent. The psyche adapts by suppressing signals that once ensured survival. What was once communal regulation becomes internalized self-management, leaving individuals emotionally isolated even in pairs. Unconsciously, defense mechanisms play a central role. Freud described how the ego protects itself from pain by distorting awareness. In the context of love, repression may hide unmet needs. Rationalization reframes emotional absence as normal. Projection places one's own withdrawal onto the partner. Jung would describe this as the shadow at work, the disowned emotional truths that remain active precisely because they are unacknowledged. Neurochemistry also contributes. Dopamine-driven attraction dominates early love, creating intensity and focus. Over time, relationships rely more on serotonin and oxytocin, chemicals linked to stability and calm. But for individuals conditioned to equate intensity with connection, calm may feel like emptiness. Loneliness emerges not because love has vanished, but because the emotional system is attuned to dysregulation rather than attunement. Cognitive dissonance further complicates matters. When someone believes I am loved while simultaneously feeling unseen, the mind seeks resolution. Often, the feeling is dismissed rather than the belief questioned. This internal split creates emotional confusion, being grateful for love while quietly starving within it. Ultimately, the mechanism behind loneliness and love is not a failure of affection, but a mismatch between emotional needs, nervous system conditioning, and unconscious expectations. The body may still be living in an old emotional climate, responding to past absences rather than present care. Understanding this shifts the narrative from blame to curiosity. Loneliness is not evidence that love is insufficient. It is information, a signal from deeper systems asking not for more affection, but for safety, presence, and emotional truth. Loneliness within love is not merely a private psychological phenomenon. It is deeply shaped by the social and historical conditions in which modern relationships exist. To understand why so many people feel emotionally isolated even while partnered, we must examine the structures that quietly train us how to relate, often against our own emotional needs. Historically, intimacy was embedded within shared survival. Families, villages, and extended kin networks created a distributed emotional system. Distress was rarely held alone. It was witnessed, responded to, and metabolized collectively. In contrast, modern romantic love is often expected to carry the full weight of emotional fulfillment. One person is asked to be lover, confidant, therapist, and secure base, all while both individuals navigate economic pressure, identity fragmentation, and chronic overstimulation. The emotional load is unprecedented. At the same time, modern culture idealizes autonomy. Independence is framed as maturity, self-sufficiency as strength. Needing emotional reassurance is subtly pathologized. This creates a paradox. We long for deep connection, yet feel ashamed of the very needs that make intimacy possible. Adler wrote of the inferiority feelings that arise when one's needs conflict with social ideals. Today, emotional dependency is one such forbidden need, pushing individuals to suppress longing in order to preserve self-image. Capitalism further shapes emotional life by prioritizing productivity over presence. Time becomes scarce, attention fractured. Relationships are squeezed into the margins between work, optimization, and self-branding. Even love is subtly instrumentalized, expected to enhance happiness, reduce stress, and validate identity. When it fails to do so, disappointment turns inward. Loneliness is internalized as personal failure rather than recognized as structural deprivation. Digital culture intensifies this dynamic. Social media offers constant images of connection, smiling couples, curated intimacy, public affection, while removing the private, imperfect processes that sustain real closeness. Comparison replaces attunement. Partners may feel lonely not because connection is absent, but because it does not resemble the idealized versions constantly displayed. The nervous system, already strained, absorbs this discrepancy as inadequacy. Historically, emotional expression was constrained by rigid roles, but it was also slower, embodied, and contextual. Modern relationships exist in accelerated time. Conflicts are expected to resolve quickly. Emotional complexity is pressured into clarity. This leaves little room for ambivalence, the simultaneous experience of love and loneliness. Jung warned that denying paradox fractures the psyche. When we cannot hold two truths at once, one is forced underground. Gender socialization also plays a role. Many men are conditioned to translate vulnerability into action or silence, while many women are socialized to over-attune, often at the cost of their own emotional visibility. These patterns create asymmetrical intimacy. One partner carries emotional awareness, the other emotional withdrawal. Both feel alone, but in different ways. In this context, loneliness in love becomes almost inevitable. It is not a failure of individuals, but a predictable outcome of systems that demand emotional containment while promising connection. Modern love is asked to bloom in conditions of scarcity. Scarcity of time, attention, safety, and shared meaning. Seeing loneliness through this lens offers relief. It reminds us that what feels like a private deficiency is often a collective wound. The ache we carry in relationships is not solely ours. It is shaped by the era we live in, and understanding that context is the first step toward reclaiming intimacy on more humane terms. The loneliness that persists within love leaves its deepest imprint on relationships themselves. It subtly reshapes how people connect, argue, desire, and withdraw. What emerges is not the absence of relationship, but a distortion of intimacy, closeness without contact, togetherness without being truly known. One of the most common relational consequences is emotional misattunement. Partners may care deeply for one another, yet consistently miss each other's inner signals. Small bids for connection, tone shifts, pauses, moments of vulnerability go unnoticed or unanswered. Over time, the person reaching out learns to stop reaching. The other may remain unaware, interpreting silence as stability rather than resignation. This dynamic slowly converts longing into distance. Loneliness also alters conflict. Disagreements become either exaggerated or avoided altogether. For some, unresolved emotional deprivation leaks out as disproportionate anger over trivial issues. The fight is never about the dishes or the missed message. It is about invisibility. For others, conflict feels too risky. Disconnection is maintained through politeness, humor, or premature forgiveness. What looks like harmony is often emotional self-erasure. Sexual intimacy is frequently affected. Desire thrives on emotional presence, yet loneliness dampens it. Partners may still be physically close, but psychologically absent. Sex becomes mechanical, performative, or infrequent, not due to lack of attraction, but due to lack of emotional safety. The body responds honestly where language does not. In this way, the sexual relationship often reveals truths the conscious mind avoids. Another consequence is relational role entrapment. Individuals begin to relate through fixed identities. The caretaker, the strong one, the rational one, the low-maintenance partner. These roles stabilize the relationship, but restrict authenticity. Jung would see this as persona dominance, the mask overtaking the self. The more rigid the role, the lonelier the individual behind it. Loneliness in love also breeds silent comparison. One partner may compare the relationship to imagined alternatives, past lovers, potential futures, idealized connections. This is not necessarily infidelity of action, but of imagination. It reflects an unmet emotional hunger searching for resonance elsewhere. The comparison itself deepens guilt and withdrawal, reinforcing isolation. Perhaps the most painful impact is existential isolation within togetherness. The individual feels unseen in the presence of the one person meant to know them most. This creates a unique form of grief, mourning connection while still inside the relationship. Because there is no clear loss, the pain has no socially recognized outlet. It remains private, ambiguous, and enduring. Importantly, these relational outcomes are not caused by malice or neglect alone. They arise from two nervous systems struggling to meet while protecting themselves. Each partner may be reenacting old attachment patterns, unconsciously prioritizing safety over connection. Without awareness, love becomes a negotiation between defenses rather than a meeting of selves. Understanding the impact of loneliness on relationships reframes the question from, "Why aren't we closer?" to, "What is preventing us from feeling safe enough to be close?" This shift replaces blame with compassion and opens the possibility of repair, not through more effort, but through deeper emotional truth. When loneliness persists within love, the psyche does not remain passive. It adapts. What emerges are coping strategies, defense mechanisms designed to manage emotional pain without directly confronting it. These strategies are not signs of immaturity or failure. They are intelligent responses to environments where emotional truth feels unsafe or unrewarded. Yet over time, what once protected the self begins to quietly imprison it. One of the most common maladaptive responses is emotional minimization. The individual tells themselves that their loneliness isn't that bad, that others have it worse, or that wanting more connection is unreasonable. This internal dialogue reduces cognitive dissonance, but it also erodes emotional self-trust. Feelings lose their authority. The self learns not to listen inwardly, reinforcing isolation at its core. Another widespread strategy is intellectualization. Instead of feeling loneliness, the individual analyzes it. They consume psychology content, label attachment styles, and explain relational dynamics with precision, often with insight and eloquence. Freud described this as a way of keeping distress at a safe cognitive distance. While understanding can be clarifying, it can also become a substitute for experience. Pain becomes a concept rather than a sensation, leaving the heart untouched. Distraction plays a powerful role. Work, self-improvement, constant stimulation, and digital immersion fill the emotional vacuum. Dopamine-driven behaviors, scrolling, optimizing, achieving, provide momentary relief while preventing emotional integration. Silence becomes threatening because it invites awareness. The nervous system remains perpetually occupied, never fully settling. Rest begins to feel uncomfortable rather than restorative. Some individuals cope through relational overfunctioning. They give more, care more, anticipate needs, and become indispensable. This creates a sense of value and control, but at the cost of mutuality. Love becomes a performance rather than a meeting. Adler might interpret this as striving for significance, an attempt to secure belonging through usefulness rather than presence. Others retreat into emotional self-sufficiency. They stop asking, stop hoping, stop reaching. On the surface, this appears as strength. Internally, it is often resignation. The attachment system goes dormant to avoid further disappointment. Jung would see this as a withdrawal into the inner world, where unmet needs are buried rather than mourned. Modern narcissistic tendencies can also function defensively. When emotional attunement is lacking, external validation becomes a regulator. Attention, admiration, and affirmation temporarily stabilize a fragile inner state. Beneath self-focus often lies unacknowledged dependency and unmet longing. This is not vanity, it is compensation. These coping patterns share a central function. They reduce vulnerability. They allow individuals to remain in love without fully risking emotional exposure. They work until they don't. Over time, the cost appears as numbness, resentment, identity confusion, and a persistent sense of emptiness that no strategy can fill. Recognizing these mechanisms is not about dismantling them prematurely. It is about understanding what they have been protecting and what they have been costing. Loneliness in love does not demand more effort or better techniques. It asks for honesty with oneself about what hurts, what is missing, and what has been silently endured. Healing loneliness within love does not begin with fixing the relationship. It begins with restoring contact with the self. Before intimacy can be renegotiated externally, it must be reclaimed internally. This stage is less dramatic than confrontation and less comforting than avoidance. It is the quiet, often uncomfortable process of turning toward what has long been silenced. The first step is emotional revalidation. Many individuals suffering from loneliness in love have learned to doubt their own feelings. Healing requires reversing this habit, treating emotions not as problems to be solved, but as signals to be listened to. From a neurobiological perspective, this means allowing the limbic system to complete stress cycles that were previously interrupted by suppression. Feeling in this sense is not indulgence, it is regulation. This process often involves grief, not only grief for what is lost, but grief for what never fully existed. The intimacy imagined, hoped for, or postponed. Freud understood mourning as the psyche's way of metabolizing absence. Without grief, the mind remains attached to fantasy. Allowing oneself to grieve unmet emotional needs is a prerequisite for honest presence, whether alone or with another. Boundaries play a central role in healing. Loneliness often arises where boundaries are either too rigid or too diffuse. Some individuals disappear into the relationship, abandoning their inner life. Others protect themselves by never fully entering. Re-establishing boundaries is not about distance, but about differentiation, the ability to remain oneself while staying emotionally connected. Healthy attachment requires two distinct nervous systems choosing closeness, not merging out of fear or retreating out of self-protection. Practically, this means learning to name needs without apology or demand. This is particularly difficult for those with avoidant or anxious attachment patterns. The nervous system may interpret need expression as danger, gentle exposure, expressing small truths, tolerating discomfort. Observing that connection can survive honesty gradually rewires expectation. Oxytocin release becomes associated with authenticity rather than performance. Therapeutic reflection, whether through therapy, journaling, or contemplative practice, helps integrate the shadow self, the parts that learn to stay hidden to preserve love. Jung believed that wholeness requires bringing these disowned aspects into awareness. When vulnerability is no longer split off, loneliness loses its grip. The self no longer waits to be seen. It becomes present. Importantly, healing does not guarantee that every relationship will deepen. Sometimes clarity reveals incompatibility or emotional limitations that cannot be bridged. Healing is not a strategy to save love at all costs. It is a commitment to reality over fantasy. Paradoxically, this honesty often creates more intimacy, not less, but only when both partners are willing. Acceptance is the final movement of this phase. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It means relinquishing the struggle to be different than one is, or to feel less than one feels. In acceptance, loneliness softens. It becomes a messenger rather than an enemy. From that place, connection, whether renewed or reimagined, emerges organically. Healing loneliness in love is not about becoming less sensitive. It is about becoming less divided within oneself. When inner alignment is restored, the presence of another is no longer required to feel real, only to feel shared. In the end, the loneliness that exists even in love asks a quiet but profound philosophical question. What does it mean to truly be with another without abandoning oneself? Beneath all psychological frameworks and social explanations lies a deeper truth. Human intimacy is not the elimination of aloneness, but the willingness to remain present within it. Existential philosophers have long understood that a certain degree of loneliness is inseparable from being human. No matter how deeply we are loved, no one can fully inhabit our inner world for us. Sartre described this as existential separation, the irreducible distance between consciousnesses. Yet, this is not a tragedy. It becomes painful only when we expect love to erase what is, by nature, fundamental. Modern culture often promises that love will complete us. When it does not, we interpret the remaining emptiness as failure of the relationship, the partner, or ourselves. But this expectation places an impossible burden on intimacy. Love is not meant to dissolve the self into another, nor to fill every internal silence. It is meant to accompany us as we face our inner landscape more honestly. From a Jungian perspective, loneliness within love often signals a call toward individuation, the process of becoming a whole and differentiated self. When we ask another to carry parts of us we have not yet integrated, connection becomes strained. Loneliness, then, is not only a wound, it is an invitation to reclaim inner territory, to meet oneself where no one else can. Paradoxically, when this inner meeting occurs, relationships often soften. The urgency to be understood diminishes. Communication becomes clearer, less charged. Love shifts from demand to offering. Two people meet not as solutions to each other's emptiness, but as companions in their humanity. This is where intimacy becomes sustainable, not because loneliness disappears, but because it is no longer feared. There is comfort in this reframing. It allows us to stop asking whether something is wrong simply because we feel alone at times. Loneliness becomes a signal of depth, not deficiency. It reminds us that we are interior beings, not problems to be solved. In this sense, love does not rescue us from ourselves. It gives us a safe place from which to return. The most enduring form of connection is not constant closeness, but mutual respect for each other's inner solitude. When partners can sit beside one another without needing to fill every silence, loneliness transforms. It becomes spacious rather than suffocating. Presence replaces performance. Being replaces proving. Ultimately, the loneliness that exists even in love is not an enemy of intimacy, but its teacher. It teaches us where we have outsourced our sense of self, where we have silenced our own truth, and where we are being asked to grow. When listened to rather than resisted, it leads not away from love, but deeper into it.